Welcome to everybody as they're
Hello.
arriving.
I'm Eric Matisek, co-chair of Denver Startup Week. Last year, we were able to bring the global audience together for Denver Startup Week, and this year, we're excited to welcome that global audience back as we celebrate and showcase the best of entrepreneurship that the Denver ecosystem in Colorado has to offer, in Denver and beyond. There are lots to explore this week, but most importantly, we're excited that you're joining us. We have nearly 50 sponsor companies who contribute to make Denver Startup Week possible. Let's show our love for these companies today and all week long. Thanks to our headquarters and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life, Capital One Cafe, the Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork, and our track sponsors who've made all the great content you're hearing today possible, which includes our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, our growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, design track sponsor, Battery 621 and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and the spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing this excitement to the entire week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and the VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our sponsors and member sponsors who are listed on the screen, and thank you for your support of Denver Startup Week. Now, let's get to it.
Yeah.
Hey boss, Mountain West Q2 forecast, 2.3 million.
Nice. Are you kidding me? Come on.
Ugh, another one.
Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Emma. We are the People Track co-chairs and members of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee.
Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation.
A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep Denver Startup Week free and accessible for all, especially our People Track sponsor, Exactly.
On that note, please enjoy the session and the entire Denver Startup Week.
All right. How's everybody doing? Day 3 of Denver Startup Week.
Day 4?
Is it day 4?
Yeah, I know. They all start running together. I think we're day 4.
Oh, I guess everything's a blur to me. And we have crossed over the threshold. Let's see, it's 12:04. So we've crossed over the threshold. It's now afternoon. So good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I will say that this is the third of 3 webinars that Tara and I have done. And I will say that we had well over 800 people sign up for the 3 that we have presented. And I want to start by saying thank you with much gratitude for all of you that are here, that maybe attended one of our previous sessions. We love what we do, but I'll tell you, it's a lot more fun when we get numbers like this. So thank you for that. Let's start this. You're going to see a theme here. I want you to type in the chat box, how many webinars have you been to so far? How many webinars have you been to so far? Type that in the chat box. If you've been in one of our prior sessions, we had we had 2 sessions on Tuesday. One on imposter syndrome, and also another one in the evening where we had a panel of female leaders and we talked about leadership. And I'll tell you, I have good news and bad news. In the imposter syndrome webinar, Tara made everybody do push-ups before we started. So the good news, I'm not going to make you do push-ups. But the bad news, I'm going to make you do something. And so what I want you to do, you see my finger? I want you to do this. What is that?
Harder.
What is that? That is a burpee for your finger. Can you do it with the other hand? That's a little more, you got to be a little more coordinated. I'm not seeing anybody out there doing this.
No,
Turn on
you
your
and I
video.
look really
Let me see
ridiculous
this.
right now. This is good.
Why am I doing that? I want you guys to warm up your fingers so that you can
Thanks,
blow
Bailey.
up that chat box. All right. I will say, and Tara, help me out with this. I think when we had the imposter syndrome talk, about 15 or 20 minutes in, we were over 100 chat messages. And so I see we're already at 14. So I want to see you guys beat that. We can have a little challenge here. So let me get to my slide deck here.
And you guys sharing with us, this is half the battle. We have a lot to share today. Some really exciting statistics, some remedies to burnout, why it's important in the workplace. But we want to hear from you all too, so that we can all normalize what's going on out there. So we love to hear your voices, and we do that through chat.
Yes. I mean, let's keep you guys from falling asleep, right? It's going to help you stay engaged. It's also going to, as Tara said, you get to learn from each other. We're not the only ones here that have a lot of wisdom to share. And one of the best ways to do that is through the chat box. So what are we here for? Again, this is our 3rd webinar and our final webinar. Surviving is over. It's time to thrive. And this is going to be a lot about this idea of overcoming burnout. So who are we? Who are we to be talking to you about burnout? Well, Tara and I have been working together for a few years now. We met at Boomtown Accelerators. If you're familiar with the Denver area, you probably know of Boomtown. That's kind of how we first came together in our working relationship. We now do a lot of things with Forging Metal Academy, and also maybe a little crazy for us, but we co-host 2 podcasts. I don't know how we got roped into doing 2 podcasts, but we co-host a podcast called Forging Metal, and also a podcast at the University of Colorado called Leadership Frontiers. If you are a podcast junkie, we would welcome you to follow along with either one of those. We interview a lot of great guests. And so I always say that I couldn't have picked a better business partner, because I always say Tara makes me look good. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand it off to Tara to introduce herself, and let's put a little pressure on her to spend a little time talking about herself, because it's not her favorite thing.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for setting that up magically for me. So I'm thrilled to be here with everybody. We love talking about this topic in particular. One, as you'll learn from my work resume, I have not only experienced this plague of burnout many times throughout my life, but we have worked and coached one-on-one coaching. We've done what feels like therapy sessions with teams, worked with CEOs, and we are learning with all this data. We are both teachers at the University of Colorado in Boulder. We are learning from all these people that we interact with and work with that burnout is everywhere, and we think we have some recipes to get rid of it. So that's why we're excited to share. And I'm going to share my work resume and what I call my life resume. And I know Ron is going to do this as well. And I hope this rubs off on all of you when people say, so what do you do? Well, work is only half, if not less than half, of what we do or should be doing. And so my work resume in brief is I spent half of my career as a journalist, traveling all over the world for well over a decade and a half, learning about people and learning how to story tell. From there, I went into trying my hand at being an entrepreneur in Hawaii. That did not go well. That was a success for like 2 months, as many of you entrepreneurs in the audience can probably relate to, and then a total plummet. But what an amazing learning experience. What I mostly learned was, and some of you have heard me say this, I recognize some names here, I learned that I'm much better at helping other people build their companies than building my own. And so now today, over the last 7 or 8 years, I coach, I do teaching at the university and also at accelerators. And this is what Ron and I do in corporations, especially for teams and businesses that are suffering from burnout. We teach these things and also business skills. My life resume, which is where I thrive, is to travel and learn and hear people's stories. Yes, for fun. I love traveling. I go everywhere I can in the state of Colorado, but I've also traveled to over 52 countries in my life, lived in 7. I've tried a million amazing, different, crazy, wild, adrenaline-filled adventures that I'm taming down as I get older. I love growing food. And I totally nerd out on food science and nutrition and how it affects our body and our performance. And so those are just a few things about me. And that's my life resume. That's what I tend to tell people about more than my work. Ron, what's your life resume? Yours is a little bit more impressive.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. But all right, so you've been to all these countries and you were kind of a foodie. Tell us the craziest thing you've ever eaten.
Live moving squid directly out of the ocean.
Oh my goodness, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Yeah, it was really not awesome.
All right, you're more adventurous than I am. As Tara said, my name is Ron Duren Jr. I founded Forging Metal Academy, and again, we have that spinoff with the podcast. I always like to say my work resume is probably not all that impressive. It's pretty pedestrian, but I'm very proud of what I call my life resume, as Tara alluded to. And there's a point why Tara and I are sharing a life resume and a career resume, and we'll get to that later in this talk. But just think about that as we move forward. But my life resume, I've done some wild and crazy stuff. I was a semi-professional baseball player. I've played at Coors Field in front of about 30,000 people in an exhibition game. I spent 1 season as a rodeo bull rider. I've built an airplane and was the test pilot on its maiden voyage. I have completed a 140.6 mile Ironman triathlon. And if that wasn't enough, I decided that I wanted to get into ultra running, and I have competed at the Leadville 100. I will say I did not finish, but I have competed in the 100-mile run, and I've run 50 miles 3 times before. And so I find a lot of purpose in my life resume, and that's going to be a little clue to you as we move forward through this talk, all right? So let's get to it. As I was preparing for this, I said, all right, let's see if I can get some snapshots of what are the headlines out there? And I always secretly think that the World Wide Web knows everything I'm doing. It probably knows that I was about to give a talk on burnout. So I feel like I've seen all these headlines that were just popping into my news feed of burnout, burnout, burnout. But maybe you've seen a lot of this as well. I would say this is not your imagination, because we know that burnout has been on the rise during what? During the pandemic. And so we might dive into a little bit of why that might be happening. As you take a look at all of these, burnout, maybe you should care about your job less. We'll circle back to that. Why is burnout a broken promise? You wouldn't ignore a burning house. Take stock of occupational burnout during this stressful time. One of the worst things you could do right now is to ignore this, not only for yourself, but also for the people that you lead. Okay? We need to address this.
We are going into, as many of you know, and you see the headlines with the Great Resignation, where over 50% of people are leaving their jobs. Many of them are saying, I'm just dissatisfied and I'm not cared for at work. This is one of the big things we hear, especially from the millennial age group who join the workforce to create impact and community. So everything we're talking about here today is to be used at home with the family, to be used if you live alone, and it is also to be thought of at work and how to bring this conversation into the workplace, because we got to do that.
Excellent. Thank you, Tara. Why don't I feel like that chat meter is stuck. It's stuck on 15. So let's see if we can up that meter. Tell me what you think as we start this conversation about burnout. Let's get on the same page. What is burnout? Type in the chat box what you believe burnout is. Tell me what maybe a definition is, or maybe some symptoms of burnout. And maybe some of you are actually experiencing this right now. What's going on with you that makes you feel burned out?
I like that. How does it feel? I think that's the first thing that'll come to our minds.
Oh, I could answer a few in that category. I have been burned out. I'll start with that right now and say I've been there. I've done that, and I know how it feels. So there we go. Now that chat box is starting to pick up some steam. Good work. Thank you for participating. Let's take a look at what I have for a definition. So this comes from Psychology Today. Notice it's a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion. All right. I want to really impress upon you that it covers all three of those bases. More than likely, if you're burned out, you're going to feel that exhaustion. You're not going to feel motivated. You don't want to do work. Nothing seems to interest you. You just kind of want to stay in bed and pull the covers over your head, right? If you've been through this, you know what I'm talking about. Notice also it comes from repeated stress. Sometimes we'll call this chronic stress, and certainly much more discussion about that. The other part is the second half of this definition. I chose this definition very specifically because many of the definitions out there talk about it as an occupational phenomenon. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't just happen in our work. A lot of times we can get burned out in our personal lives as well. As you can say, parenting. Anybody get burned out from parenting?
Yes, I see it in the chat box even. Yep.
I have several friends that I think, especially during the pandemic, right? When you're having to homeschool your kids and also, carry on the normal activities of everything you had to do before. I'm not a parent, and I almost feel bad that I laugh, but I can't even imagine the challenge that is to try to homeschool your kids during a pandemic. So yeah, maybe you got burned out from that, caretaking, maybe romantic relationships, or maybe just if you really get immersed in a hobby. A lot of my friends that really get deeply into some sports and hobbies can get burned out on that as well. So we don't have enough time in this talk to go into those areas. But if you look closely, I think most of our talk will be around the workplace setting. But you can see direct connections to other areas of your life. All right. And I'm looking at the chat box. Look at it go. Nice work.
Good stuff. Everything I'm seeing in the chat box is 100% related to burnout and the feelings of burnout. So we're right on target. Good.
I had a funny feeling. You guys probably know this topic better than I do. You know it. You've been there. You feel it, right? All right. So let me, I always like to say, if I'm going to sell you an idea, if I want to influence you to buy what I'm selling, I've got to lay a little groundwork, right? I got to lay out maybe some statistics that cause a little pain. You go, ooh, that hurts. So I'm going to do that before we get to the good stuff of, all right, how do we fix this? I want to lay the groundwork for why is this important? Why should you care? Maybe that's obvious because you're here already, right? You're here in this talk for a reason. But let's take a look at some of the stuff that's coming out of the research. And this is all from 2021, so very recently, obviously deep into the pandemic. And this came from the job website Indeed. So 52% of people are experiencing burnout. All right, more than half of us are feeling this. That should immediately kind of make you believe this is ubiquitous, right? It's pretty prevalent. A lot of people are feeling it. Also notice, before the pandemic, it was at 43%. I think that was from 2019. And so it's gone up, 9%. Shouldn't surprise us, right? All right, let's keep going. Find my cursor here. All right, 59% of millennials are experiencing it. So a little bit of an uptick with millennials, up from 53%. Now we look at baby boomers. Notice that they skip Tara and I's generation right in there.
Right, we don't matter anymore, Ron.
We're not even important. So they go right from the millennials to the baby boomers because they're the only ones that move the needle. So it's a little bit of a side note there. But anyway, millennials 59%. But wow, what a big, really a drop for 31% of baby boomers. Also up, but I want you to think about this and maybe type this in the chat box. Why do you think there's such a difference between baby boomers and millennials?
When it comes to burnout.
Yes, when it comes to burnout. That's a
Keep
good
it there.
good
Let's keep it
clarifier and try to keep it clean. Millennials get picked on a lot, so let's be respectful. But I'll tell you something. We're going to circle back to this at the end, but I'll also tell you, if you were paying attention, Tara gave you a little clue earlier. So what is the difference between the way millennials look at work compared to how baby boomers look at work? All right, next one. 2/3 of us believe it's gotten worse during the pandemic. How many of you believe it's gotten worse? How many of you would say, yeah, it's gotten worse for me? I know from a personal account, it's gotten worse. I don't know, but what about you, Tara? Have you felt burnout during the pandemic?
100%. I think I did. We talked about this early into the pandemic, and I think we were fueled. Some of us, like myself, were fueled by adrenaline. And what is this wild thing that's sending us all into quarantine? But man, in any experience in life, when that adrenaline starts tapering off, then we can go the opposite direction. And so you'll find throughout this talk that a lot of burnout equals some of the things that I'm seeing in the chat box: apathy, depression, anxiety, right? It's not just overworked. It's actually a lot of different symptoms. So yes, I have felt it on and off, but I have the tools that help me pull myself out of it now, which 6 years ago I did not. So I feel the pain of feeling nonstop burnout, but let's see if we can start a movement to fix that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It's not just about working 80 hours a week. A lot of people like to assume it's just about overwork. And we'll talk about this idea that you can work 80 hours a week and not get burned out. People do it all the time. And what is the magic recipe that they have that they're tapping into? So I think that's important. I'm right there with you, Tara. I had my moments. I have had my moments during the pandemic. I always like to say, my experience running 50 miles. I like to ask people, what do you think the hardest part about running 50 miles is? Type that in the chat. What's the hardest part about running? These should be interesting answers. You're insane, Ron.
Yes,
I hear that,
getting out the door.
Yeah,
that's what I see, and that's what I was thinking.
You can think of this as like a bathtub curve. At the beginning, at the starting line, it's exciting, right? We're starting the race and it's exciting. You have all that adrenaline going, as Tara said, and all things are good. I always like to say for about the first 10 miles, life is good. And then you can imagine a bathtub curve. That adrenaline's gonna die off and you're gonna go to a low point. I always say the hardest part of the 50-mile race is the middle. It's that point where you're in that middle and the low point, and then it's going to pick back up as you get close to the finish line, right? And so a lot of things that we do that are hard in life, you got to expect that low point in the middle. And I think that's when I was feeling burnout the most is, 2 or 3 months into the pandemic, it was crushing me. All those things, all the adrenaline had bled off and now it was reality and I was locked in my apartment and it wasn't a lot of fun. You guys probably can relate to that, right? So that's one of the reasons why we're seeing an uptick in burnout. All right, let's keep going with this. Let's talk about some facts about burnout. It is not a sign of mental weakness. Don't use this for self-loathing. If you're feeling burnout, do not think there's something wrong with you. There's nothing abnormal. Quite honestly, this is a normal thing. And I'll hold my thoughts on that, but I just want you to know it is not a sign of mental weakness. It's also not a diagnosable psychological disorder. That doesn't mean it's not real. All right. I have had some people say, oh, it's all in your head. It's not real. And I do not believe that at all. If you've been through burnout, you know it debilitates you. In fact, there are some people that will need help from a licensed professional to get themselves out of the hole. Much of what we're going to talk about with you today it's going to be more in the category of preventing this than if you're in the hole now, it's hard to get out. Let's just pause right there for a minute, because I think Tara might have some wisdom to share with us. I was talking to somebody recently. They knew I was giving a talk on burnout, and they said, "Hey, Ron, I'm suffering from burnout. What's your advice?" And so they went down this whole list of things. I'm behind on my work. Quite honestly, they said, I'm about 2 weeks behind on my work. I don't have any motivation. I'm very tired. I know I should be exercising and drinking water and getting my sleep, but as everything closes in on me, even those things I can't find time for. And I struggled to give her a really good answer of how to get out of that hole. Much of what we're going to share is let's look forward and be proactive and try not to get in the hole. But if we end up in the hole, what do we do, Tara?
My first recommendation, and I think it comes before sleep, and I think it comes before mindfulness, which this kind of takes mindfulness, but before you start meditating and sleeping and eating and worrying about your exercise, I think the absolute first thing we have to do is do a reality check on the chatter that's going on in our head. Because that chatter is a bunch of BS most of the time. Mindfulness is an amazing thing, and being mindful of how we're feeling is an amazing thing. But when we start beating the hell out of ourselves and we say, "Oh, if I could just get out of this, what am I doing? I'm so stupid. This is ridiculous. And I'm losing my mind. I can't focus. I hate my job." That chatter actually starts a biochemical reaction in our bodies that elevates cortisol and adrenaline in a bad way, and literally spins our entire nervous system out of control. And then it just gets in a loop. And when I coach my people, I actually say it's like running in a, what is that called? A rat circle. What do the rats run through?
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about? The little
not
wheel,
the
right?
yeah,
the mouse
the
wheel.
hamster wheel.
The hamster wheel, thank you. So it's like running in a hamster wheel and you can't get out. And that's because of the negative, horrible chatter that you allow yourself to have. We can't control a lot in life, but we can control what we say to ourselves in our own head. So once you go down that road of negative talk, catch yourself and start doing the hard work of eliminating that. That's the first step before anything else, in my opinion.
Yes, I like to call that the negative downward spiral. And I think, as just to piggyback on what Tara said, number one, self-awareness. See it, identify it, know I'm going down this path. Because here's the thing, I still go down this. I teach and I coach on this. I still get in my negative headspace, but I recognize it quickly. And I have mantras. I'll use mantras to snap myself out of it. One of them is clean it up. And I would encourage you to come up with your own mantras that are meaningful to you. 3 words is, we know from psychology, like a beginning, middle, and end of a story. We like things in 3s. So if you can do it in 3, that's great. So clean it up. That's my cue to myself to clean up my thinking. I'm getting into a negative headspace and I need to clean it up. So that usually snaps me right out of it. This has taken a lot of practice to get to that, but here's the thing. You guys can all do this as well. Recognize it, snap yourself out of it sooner rather than later. Don't spend 5 days ruminating on that negative downward spiral. All right? That's my tip for that. All right, so it shares some symptoms with depression. We're going to see some overlap between burnout and depression, and quite honestly, depression can lead to burnout, and burnout can lead to depression. They are close cousins, and we'll see some of the same symptoms. It is normal. I think I mentioned that already, but I will say it's different for everybody. I have some friends that I almost feel like they're immune to burnout. And the research will tell us that part of it is our DNA. What's in our genetic makeup is going to be part of that equation. Also, our lifestyle, mindset's going to make a difference. What overwhelms me may not be the same as overwhelms you. And it depends on what context, right? If you're really good at something that might overwhelm me easily, you may say, oh, that's no big deal. So it all depends on your upbringing, your culture, and all that can impact this. Now, there's plenty of things we can do to move the levers, but realize everybody's a little bit different. And then lastly, grinding through it. Most of us, when we get burnout, especially if you're trained like I am, you just want to grind through it. You want to say, you know what, quit being weak, quit being lazy, quit, that self-loathing that Tara talked about. Don't do that. Don't be hard on yourself. Give yourself grace that you're going through it. It's your body, mind, system trying to get your attention. The reason you're not feeling well, there's a good reason, all right? Your body is saying, pay attention, all right? If you don't pay attention, I'm going to make bad things happen. That's basically what your body, mind, system is telling you. So grinding through it, not a good strategy. Not saying you can't do it. I'm just going to say it's not the best strategy, all right? And a lot of people, I think that's their go-to when they feel burnout, right? We got to keep going. All of us entrepreneurs out there, right? We just got to keep grinding. All right, I would say something's got to change. You got to figure out what needs to change so you can get out of this, all right? All right, so again, as I lay out this case, why should leaders care? Whether you're a CEO or you're leading a team or really anybody, maybe it doesn't even have to be formal leadership. Maybe you're influencing brothers, sisters, significant others. Why should you care? This is going to be centered along the lines of the workplace, but I think all of us should be looking at the people that are in our care and paying attention to how they're doing. So 63% of people that are feeling burnout are likely to take a sick day. I hope that's obvious. Why? Type in the chat box. Why do you think people that are feeling burnout would be way more likely to take a sick day? Anybody have any thoughts? Let me see that chat meter go up. Why would we be more likely to do that? All right, next one. Half as likely to discuss how to approach, or half as likely to discuss how to approach performance goals with their manager. If you're feeling like crud and you're feeling like your performance is low, do you want to go discuss that with your manager? Of course not. You just want to survive through the day, right? Performing at your best level is not something that's on your radar. 23% more likely to visit the emergency room. Again, probably likely related to having a sick day, right? 2.6 times more likely to leave their current employee. All right. Tara talked about the Great Resignation. There's a lot of moving parts in the Great Resignation, but one of them is this. People are feeling burned out. And if you are a leader, if you're a CEO, if you're an entrepreneur, and that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will. All right. If you don't say this is not important, if you say this doesn't impact the bottom line, I would say I respectfully disagree. This absolutely impacts the bottom line.
And before we leave this slide, Ron, I want to throw out, I would love to see in the chat box really quick, if you are a leader, how many people are you leading in your workplace? And that can be your home. Your home can be your workplace too. So if you've got a family of 7 that you're taking care of, I want to see that number in there. But how many people do you actually have to take care of either at work or home? Throw it in chat, just throw the number in. And then what are some of the things that you are incorporating that you're willing to share? And or what are some of the things you see that are being incorporated in your work or home that are good in this realm, right? Share it, because there are some companies and CEOs and leaders out there that are struggling with this. And if you have a great thing that you've got going on in your office, share it. We're here to share all this knowledge.
All right. So I don't have, what kind of visibility do you have to the chat box there, Tara? What kind of, when I asked, why are we more likely to take a sick day or maybe end up in the ER because of this? What kind of answers were we seeing?
Some people are saying they don't take a sick day, Ron. They just keep working harder. There's that, so which I think
already
a lot of us
people are not listening to my advice.
No, I think that we do get stuck in that. And especially with COVID, when we're all identifying mostly with our jobs, we're finding our self-identity really tied to our work. We just keep working because it's what we do. Or scrolling through social media. They take a mental sick day because they're taking care of their mental health, or they're overwhelmed. It's causing them physical sickness, or, and this is what I went to in my head, avoidance. Like, I need a day where I just can escape and avoid.
Yeah, no kidding. Stay in bed all day, right? Pull the covers over our head and I'm here to tell you, sometimes you need that. That's not always a bad thing. I've done this where not only have I spent a day in bed, but I've also said, I'm going to bed at 7:30 tonight. You can make fun if you want, but sometimes we just need to recharge. And we just need to, I don't know, turn off the world for a minute. That's part of what's going on. A lot of it though, too, is, and I think Tara was touching on this, is what's happening is we're in a threat mode. So our sympathetic nervous system is activated almost constantly because of what? Chronic stress. And when we get into a mode of being sympathetically activated, and when I say that, that's a sympathetic nervous system. Think of that as when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, we have two parts to that. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, and we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. Think of the sympathetic nervous system as like an accelerator pedal on our arousal system, and we can think of the parasympathetic nervous system as the brake pedal. So we want to be working both the brake pedal and the accelerator. If we're always on the accelerator, what's going to happen to the engine? It's more than likely going to blow, right? So we got to let off the accelerator and we got to hit that brake pedal. And that's what's happening when we are feeling chronic stress. We are almost always in a sympathetic nervous system activation. And that is not what we're designed for. We'll talk much more about this as we go forward, but that is part of why this wreaks havoc on your system. This is part of the why you're going to feel sick. It's going to do numbers on your health.
And
okay?
Everyone raise your hand. I can't see everyone because unfortunately you all have your cameras off. We love to see everybody's faces. So if you want to jump in here and join us, that's awesome. Oh, Carrie, hi. Good to see you again.
Oh, Carrie.
Yeah.
Good to see you again.
Oh, it's so great to see faces. Oh, it's like speaking into a black abyss when we can't see you guys. So this is amazing. Thank you for turning
See
your
the
cameras
smile on my face now that
we're
I
a
get to
team.
see you?
Yeah, we're a tribe now. This is great. So Ron, what happens to the system when we say, okay, that's it. I'm taking a mental health day. I'm pulling the covers over my head, and now I'm going to feel like crap and like guilty all day long.
Well, this is, I know this.
Because we've all done it. Like, let's raise our hands. Have we beat ourselves up for that? I have.
Why?
Oh, right.
Here's the thing. Why do we feel that way? Well, we've been programmed by, I don't want this to sound like we're being victims. That's not what I'm advancing here, but we've been programmed by society to make us feel like if we're not always doing, if we're not always productive, like every minute of every day, then something's wrong with us, right? And we usually go into that negative self-talk. Why am I so lazy? Why am I not as strong as Tara? Why is Tara not struggling like I am? Why am I so defective, right? And this doesn't help. If you're going to take a day off or you're going to take 15 minutes off, make sure that you let go of that negative talk. Don't beat yourself up for the fact that you're not doing anything right now. It's okay to be a human being. All right. We don't always have to be a human doing. This is very hard for people to unplug from this. I have my students and clients say, you know what? I want you to spend 5 minutes doing nothing. No agenda. That's like, taking away somebody's drug of choice. We feel like, oh my God, I'm wasting time. Is it really a waste of time? Think about that. Your brain needs a rest. Here's something I like to share. If I were to give you, let's say I gave you a 1 pound weight. Let's say we've got a 1 pound dumbbell and I want you to curl that 1 pound weight. 1 pound is not enough, not a lot, but I want you to curl that weight for 8 hours straight, no breaks. Tell me how that goes for you. I don't care how strong you are. More than likely, you're not going to make it to the end of that 8 hours. Why do we expect our brain to do the same thing? All right. Think of your brain as a muscle. It needs a break. All right. This is all going to come full circle as we move forward. But one of the things that I want you to start thinking of that idea, the brain needs a break. All right. And so whatever that looks like for you, and we'll offer some ideas on that, but consider that. The last one here is 13% of the people that are feeling burnout are less confident in their performance. Quite honestly, I'm surprised that's not a bigger number. If I'm not feeling well, I'm not motivated, I'm probably going to feel like I'm not doing well. So all those things should get your attention. As we move into this slide, I want you to look at the slide in two ways. These are the causes of burnout that come from a 2018 Gallup poll. And as you look at this, I want you to look for solutions. If you're leading people, how might you make these causes go away or maybe alleviate them? Anybody know what the number one driver of stress is? Type that in the chat box. What's the number one driver of stress? This is always kind of fun when I do this with my students. The research is going to tell us the number one driver of stress is time. Time pressure is, if I tell you to do task A, and then I say, all right, you got 3 minutes to do task A, which one is going to feel like more pressure? I think it's obvious. A lot of people say money as being a pressure driver, and I would say that is true, but from what I've seen in the research, usually it's time. So unreasonable time pressures. Are you putting your people under unreasonable time pressures? As we go into the pandemic, we're trying to do more. A lot of companies are doing more with less. All right? This is a recipe for burnout. I know if you're a business owner, yeah, it sounds good, doesn't it? I want to get more out of my people and not hire. I got 10 people and I want to get more out of them. I don't want 11 or 12 people. I want 10. Sounds great, right? Why is that a bad thing? As a business owner or a CEO, why is that a bad thing? Tara, why is that a bad thing?
Well, I love what Stephanie's got in here. The number one driver of stress is the way we think about stressors.
Oh, that might be even better than time. Good. I like that. Mindset
Right?
is huge.
Mindset is huge on all of this. And I want to say, Ron said, take a look at these graphics that we're going to throw up here pretty quickly and see how you can alleviate or get rid of them in the workplace for your people and for your teams. But it's also open up the conversation, just like we're doing here today. We're not giving you any magical fixes that are going to cure everything around burnout today, but we're opening this conversation so we can change our mindset. Thanks for it, Stephanie.
Yeah, and I would just throw in there again. If you burn out your people, is that good for business? You want to get more out of them? You want to put unreasonable time pressure on them because what? You're going to make more money in your business? All right, you're going to break the system. You're going to break the machinery down. We cannot treat our people like robots because quite honestly, they're not. They're human beings, and we need to look at them that way. So invest in your people. Take care of your people. This is so important. Tara already mentioned this, and I want to reemphasize it. We need to take care of our people. We can't abuse them and expect them to keep going. All right? And I know that's hard for a lot of people to take right now. They say, well, wait a minute. I didn't have to do this before the pandemic. Why do I have to do it now? Well, maybe we should have been doing it before the pandemic, and now it's just come to the surface that, hey, this is a problem. All right. So next one, let's jump to the next one. Lack of communication and support from your manager. This is an easy one, right? If we're not communicating with our team, there's a lot of uncertainty around that. Make sure that you're supporting your team. I think I've already mentioned we need some care around that. Lack of role clarity. I'll tell you right now that Tara and I are doing some coaching around this, where we're spending time with an executive team and helping them get some role clarity. Who's doing what and why. That may seem obvious, but a lot of times, a lot of companies are not clear on that. Again, adding uncertainty that is going to drive up that sympathetic nervous system activation. We don't like uncertainty as human beings. Unmanageable workload. I think that one's probably pretty obvious, right? It really is related to that first one. Don't put too much on their plate. Maybe even consider taking some things off their plate. I know that's hard to do as a business owner, but you might consider that to keep your people in the right place, performing well. And then lastly, treat them fairly. Be as transparent as you can with everything that's going on and treat them fairly. And I would also add perception of fairness trumps actual fairness. What I mean by that is you say, well, I'm being fair, but if Sally doesn't think I'm being fair, what she thinks and her perception is gonna trump what I believe. And I would say we need to have a conversation with Sally and see if we can get her on the same page that, yes, I am being fair. So keep that in mind as you talk about fairness with your team. Burnout. I wanted to share this. We've already talked about a definition, but I want to share this definition because I think there's some important stuff here. And I'm gonna share these 3 points that I feel like are a little bit redundant, but still. Notice what I have highlighted. It's a chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed, okay? The key to that is not successfully managed. And so we're going to start to change our talk now to some fixes, some remedies. All right. That's where we're going.
And let me jump in here as we're talking about what's going wrong in the workplace and answer. Bailey, you brought up a good question. I know it's on some other people's minds. How do we bring these ideas that we're about ready to go through to leadership? If you're an employee at a corporation, it doesn't matter how big or how small, how do we get our leaders to do this, right? And honestly, I don't think it has anything to do with how big, if this is a 150,000 person company or a 23 person startup. You need to go to the first line of commit, like right up to your chain of command, the first person that is your supervisor, and start there. If that's not working, because not everybody knows how to do these things, you go to the next person and you get a team together. This is where I challenge everyone to become an entrepreneur. And my students, I know we've got some students from CU here today. They know that I tell them, if you don't like something, get innovative to fix it. Don't sit around and complain about it and make it worse. If you don't like where we're holding class or where your professors are holding class, get a team together and go say, hey, we've got an idea. Can we start doing X instead? Right? The worst case is that they say no and you go around them to someone else. Good
advice. Thank you, Tara. All right, so let's get to prescriptions. We like Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights, and he talks a lot about prescriptions. And so Tara and I both kind of get on board with that. So here I'm going to give you 5 prescriptions, and we'll talk about each one of these, but I want to show these as just kind of a primer for what's coming. So take care of your physical, mental, and emotional health. We'll give you some tips on that. Schedule routine stress breaks throughout your week. I want to be very clear. I say routine stress breaks. The best answer is daily stress breaks. All right. One of the things that I'm going to tell you is if you are stressed out for 51 weeks out of the year and you take that 1 week vacation expecting to come back with all that burnout gone and recharged and ready to go, I hate to break this to you, it's probably not going to work. So what both Tara and I are going to advocate is to try to get daily breaks from that stress. Much more on that as we move forward. Cognitive reappraisal. Somebody said this earlier. Is stress good or bad? We're going to talk about that. Build mental toughness. This is going to be a lot more in the category of being preventative. As we move forward, how can we do better? When the next pandemic comes, how are we going to weather that storm better? And I know that just made you cringe because you're going, no way, there's not going to be another one, is there? There will be another crisis, whether it's a pandemic or not. We need to be ready for that one. All right, so that's what we're going to go through. Let's get into this. Mental toughness. We talked about earlier. Do not just grit your teeth and get through this, all right? And when we talk about mental toughness at Forging Metal, we do it in a little bit different way than most people. We like this definition, but I would also say we're very mindful about mental toughness. It is not always the best approach to grit your teeth and get through it. Sometimes it is, but we want to be mindful about the times when we actually want to actually maybe retreat or quit. Maybe we pivot. There's a lot of things that we can do, and to be mentally tough without good self-awareness is actually very toxic and can be disastrous. So that's not what we're talking about here. What I do want to impress upon you, notice this is a plastic personality trait. That means it can be changed. We used to think that personality could not be changed. It can be tweaked. You can't fundamentally change a lot of your personality, but there are some things that you can change. And also notice mental toughness, it determines how you're going to deal with stressors. People that are very mentally tough deal with stressors better. That's what the research will tell us. And so again, we want to start to kind of change that perspective and change that mindset on how we deal with things that overwhelm us. Okay, this is the model that we use. This is called the 4 C's model of mental toughness. We don't have enough time in this talk to go through all 8 of these categories. But I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about the 2 under control. One of the things that comes out of sports psychology, if you've ever been an athlete, you've probably heard maybe coaches say, control the controllables. Control the things that you can. What I want you to think about is The definition of burnout is a sense of overwhelm. Okay? So there's a couple things that we can do to get better at this. One of them is, let's say we have an imaginary line of overwhelm. My sense of overwhelm is going to be different than yours. It's also going to be context dependent. There's certain things that I get overwhelmed really easily at, and other things that I don't. But anyway, that's a moving target, and it's different for everybody. What I want to do is say we can either move the line so that we say, I don't get as overwhelmed as I used to in this situation, or we can try to move whatever we're doing underneath that line. So we're not moving the line of overwhelm, we're just moving other things underneath it, right? So there's two different ways that we can attack this. This one is actually moving your line of overline up. I want this to increase. I want to be able to weather the storm better. Inside the umbrella of mental toughness is words like resilience and grit. How do I increase my resilience, my grit, my mental toughness so that I don't get kind of, taken off my game as easily? So one of the ways that we can do that is with the control metrics or the control category. Go ahead.
Before you
Tara.
go into that, let me just ask, for those of you I can see and those of you that are joining us on YouTube Live, just raise your hand into the ether if you consider yourself a perfectionist.
Oh, that's a good one.
If you consider yourself a perfectionist.
Matthew is quick to raise his hand. Oh my goodness, Nikki.
Or, oh yeah, thanks for raising your hands that way too. Or you have found that you have started telling people that you are feeling like a perfectionist. This I've heard a lot during the pandemic. People that did not consider themselves that before the pandemic are now doing it. And I think I have one answer. There are many. And that is when we are faced with uncertainty, which is a very scary thing, we tend to the brain wants to become safe as soon as possible. And one of the ways we feel safe in our world, in our environment, in our daily activities at work is to try to control what's going on around us. And as Ron is pointing out, and we'll show you, we cannot control everything. There are very few things in life we can. Our mindset and our self-talk is definitely one that we can control. But this control that we need sends us into this perfectionism realm that is unattainable. It is unachievable, and we can't get there. So we're always letting ourselves down and becoming overwhelmed. So if you did raise your hand, what I challenge you to do is take a few breaths, like for 20 minutes today, and think about that. Are you taking on too much to potentially make your surroundings feel a little bit safer? And how's that working out for you? I am that person. I am recovering still today from perfectionism, and trying to control everything is a nightmare. It really is. It's overwhelming.
I'm right there with you. I say I'm a recovering perfectionist, and the other word that I think it goes hand in hand with it is I was a control freak. I didn't see it, but a lot of my friends saw it, and when I let that go, life got much better. I like to say when you live, and here's the thing, I don't want, my dad used to proudly exclaim, I'm a perfectionist, and I got a lot of that influence from him, and that sounds like a good deal, right? We want to be elite. We want to be world changers. So we've got to be perfect. BS, all right? I'm just going to say BS. You can be elite without being perfect, and I agree with Tara. I don't think it's even achievable. But what you're doing is you're setting a target that is either very difficult to reach or impossible to reach. So you've set yourself up for a lifetime of what? Failure. You're never going to hit that mark, and if you do hit that mark, it's going to be very, very rarely. Why set yourself up for that kind of stress load? So shrink that idea of what do I truly control? You control your decisions. You control rational choice. You control your opinion. You control what you think. All of those things. And again, there's not much there that we truly 100% control. What about our reputation? Do we control that? Nope. I hate to break it to you, but we don't. You like to think you control your reputation, but you don't. You have influence on it, but what Tara thinks about me, I cannot control. All right? So think about some of these things that we think we're controlling, but we're really not. And all it does is what? Frustrates the living shit out of us. I know this because I've been there. All right, so think about that. I know that's a fundamental change for a lot of you. A lot of you are going to be really hard. You don't want to let that go. That's your identity, to be a perfectionist. Sit with that for a while, and I would go back to what Tara said. How well is that working out for you? All right, so that's what we're talking about here. Life control is this idea of I really believe I can do this. People that score high, and there is an assessment that you can take for mental toughness. People that score high in life control believe they can make a difference. They happily juggle multiple projects. I do not want to advocate multitasking. I'm not a fan of multitasking, but I would say what I would call switch tasking. So people that are good in this category, they can have a lot of things going on, but I would advocate that you switch task. I focus 100% on this one. I switch to the next one. I give it 100% of my attention, switch to the next one. That's different than dividing ourselves between multiple projects. They're good at planning and organization. They work hard and they believe everything is possible, and we see growth mindset. If you know growth mindset, we see it show up here. I might not understand it, but with work and with effort, I can not only understand it later, but even master it. So if you can relate to any of those, you might score high on life control. If you don't relate to those, maybe these are opportunities for you to work on this, okay? The next one is emotional control. How to sum that up? I can manage my emotions and also other people's emotions. As I said, we do well with our own emotions. Do we allow ourselves to get out of control with our emotions? And then influencing others. One thing that comes out of psychology is called emotional contagion. My emotions are going to impact other people around me. You guys, this shouldn't surprise you, right? Good and bad. If I have a good attitude, that usually is going to permeate through the team I lead. If I have a bad attitude, same thing. If I'm always positive, if I'm always negative, those are the kind of things. If I'm always whining, what do you think my team, how do you think they're going to be? More than likely, that's going to bleed into them as well. So be careful with what kind of attitude and what kind of emotion you bring to your team. They are difficult to provoke. People that score high in emotional control, they don't get provoked easy. They deal well with difficult people and even bullies. We see that people that score high on this are usually not bullied. And I think there could be multiple things going on there. And then lastly, the masked anxiety. I'm not of the opinion that it's always good to I think sometimes showing vulnerability to your team is a good thing. But I would say be very careful when and how you show that. Most of the time, if you're freaking out on the inside, you want to keep that to yourself. I like to say, does anybody on the Titanic want to see the captain running down the deck screaming, "We're all going to die"? Of course not. He may have been thinking that, but of course, all evidence says that he was not doing that. So again, you could be having a hard time on the inside, but don't let your team see that. As they say, don't let them see you sweat. All right? So those are some things that you can work on to raise that level of what overwhelms me. Okay? All right. Type in the chat box. We already talked about this and maybe I already gave away this answer, but tell me what you think. Is stress good or bad? Boy, it gets a lot of negative headlines, don't it? Stress, good or bad?
It's both. A little bit of stress is good. We've got a lot of both. It depends on the kind of stress, Ron, that's coming out. Mm-hmm. Somebody's
well schooled. You know, there's a book out there called The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal. You really did she has a TED Talk as well. If you say, I don't have time for a book, Ron, I'm burned out. A little joke there, a little burnout joke. If a TED Talk's better, go watch the TED Talk. But it really changed my life and really the way I look at stress. I used to think all stress was bad. Every headline we see says stress is bad. The media has not been well schooled in how to talk about stress. Notice they always talk about stress. And I put that in quotes because I don't know if they even know the difference between distress and eustress, EU as a prefix to stress. That's the good stress. Not all stress is bad. And when you see headlines that saying stress is bad, they're saying stress in the headlines. What they mean is distress. And usually what they mean, if they know what they're talking about chronic stress. We are not designed for chronic stress. What we're designed for is transient moderate stress. All right. And we'll get to that in a second. But before I do, this came from, what is the book, Tara?
The book is from Bradley Stolberg. I can't remember the name of it.
Peak Performance, I think.
Peak Performance.
Yeah. So this is a really simple equation. Some of you maybe have seen it, but I think this is so powerful, so easy to understand. If you go back to your maybe even high school math, you'll know that the only way we're going to get growth out of this equation is to have both stress and rest. If I remove stress from the equation, I can't get growth. If I remove rest from the equation, I now cannot get growth, right? So we need both of these elements to get growth. So is growth good? I mean, people think growth is good. I hope everybody's
good.
thumbs up. I want to be stagnant the rest of my life, Ron. I never want to grow, and I never want to improve, and I never want to make my million and have a successful company, right? I think we all on board that growth is a good thing. And so if we look at it that way, so growth is good, then stress must also be good too, right? And also rest. All of these are going to be good things. Here's the deal though. We need to learn to turn it off. We are not robots. I mentioned this earlier. Treat your team like robots or machines and you will break them. All right. They are not robots. Robots are coming, but that's a whole nother discussion. We're not ready to talk about that in this talk, but treat them as the human beings that they are. Know that they're going to need to turn off that stress cycle, all right? And so what does that look like? We want to think of this as a oscillation between stress and rest. In between those two states, we're going to have a state change, all right? This is all going to lead to growth. What do those state changes look like? Think about that. We're gonna share some stuff here with you in a second, but think about for you. Maybe you have tactics in place already. You say, "Hey, Ron, I got this. I know how this works, and I have some things." Type in the chat box. What do you do to break free from what we call chronic stress? Again, this is what we call in psychology. This is called transient moderate stress. Transient moderate stress. So transient means it comes and goes with time. And moderate, that's up to you to decide what moderate stress is. But we don't want extreme stress. Moderate stress is what we respond well to. I would say we can massage that. What's moderate, again, back to the idea of what overwhelms me, what moderate stress is to you and me are going to be different. So move that level up, and then that is good for us. Our body is actually very well designed for transient moderate stress. We should not try to get this out of our life. We should actually welcome it in. Because why? Is anybody following along?
Yes, we've got good answers in here for state change.
Why? It's because we want growth, right? So welcome stress, transient moderate stress is going to lead to growth.
Those of you that are joining us on YouTube and can't see our chat box here, some of these state changes that people are sharing over here in Zoom. Napping, closing my eyes, stretching, right?
Good.
Exercise,
Good.
Therapy, yoga, restructuring our lives. I like that one. I do this a lot, Oliver. Restructuring our lives can give us that state change. We have had podcast guests, and I can't remember, there's two of them that have talked about just jumping in the shower can be a state change. Dancing, right? So these are all good things.
Hot shower or cold shower?
You know, I think I remember hearing both. I think,
There's certainly going to be a state change. Yeah. There's a lot of great stuff out there. The other thing I would ask you is, all right, all of you that said, hey, yeah, I got a strategy. And my next question is, are you scheduling it into your week? Are you intentional about getting that into your days? Many people say, sometimes I do this or I do that, and I just fit it in when I can. We are advocating you schedule that in and you're very intentional about your state changes. Even if you use the word, it's time for me to get a state change. Go for a 15-minute walk, all right? I need to let the muscle rest, all right? That's what we need to do. We need to turn that off. Again, remember, trying to do bicep curls for 8 hours, it's not going to happen. Your brain needs a break. All right, so let me throw another thing out. We're going to continue this idea about stress. one of the things that I talk about a lot with my clients is what's in your backpack.
And for
what-
us, I mean, those of you that are in Colorado, I think pretty much everybody, right? We've all been on a hike or a rock climb or a bike ride where we've had to pack a backpack. And I think if you're heavy into mountaineering or trekking or multi-day hikes in the backcountry or skiing, you know that every single thing you put in that backpack is super important. And if it's not relevant, you're going to pay the price for the extra weight, right?
Exactly. I think that we start with, that's a great example because we got to start with, do I need this in my backpack? I've done some backpacking and my first pack was really heavy. And then I said,
too.
okay, that's really hard and I want less and less. Some people will actually cut down their toothbrush to reduce weight. I don't know if you need to go that far. Here, let me share something from the world of sports psychology. One of the things that's coming out of the latest research is with sports psychologists working with elite cyclists at the Tour de France. So these are the best cyclists in the world. They're doing a very hard thing. Every day they have to go out and climb mountains on their bike. So you can imagine the kind of workload they need to do. And so sports psychologists are not only, as they are starting to go into the Tour de France, they're checking in with them and saying, how are things going in your personal life? And you say, wait a minute, how is that related to their sports performance? Well, what we've found from the research is that stress load is stress load. We like to think all of my stress is at work. Well, what's going on in your personal life? Because that's in your backpack too. Whether it's a upcoming wedding or you're moving, or maybe you're having problems with your significant other. Maybe your children are driving you crazy. You may not even realize that that's a stress load, but that's a stress load that's going to weigh you down. Not to say, for one thing, I'd say try to get as much out of that backpack as you can, but I want you to be cognizant of the fact it's not just work that's stressing us out, it's other things. And again, they may be just simple things. Maybe just something is irritating us. That could be a stress load that we're not seeing. So when I do coaching, I do exactly that. I look at you guys as corporate athletes and I say, okay, what's going on in your personal life? Give me a little kind of paint the picture of what's going on. Is all things good or do you have a lot of stress going on? And so that can help us kind of form our coaching around that. All right. So keep that in mind. What's in your backpack and what can you get rid of? All right. We're going to go through these pretty quick. These are good tips, but in the essence of time, we're going to go through them pretty quick. So I think we're going to try to share this slide deck with you later if we can. So if we go through too quick, you should be able to get this later. So I'm going to hand this over to Tara to give you all of her wisdom.
Yes, we will totally share the slide deck, right? If you want to take these conversations, between you and your significant other, your family, your friends, and especially highly encourage taking them into your workplace, we will share all this info with you and you can do that. It's so important. Just link with us on LinkedIn or send us a message or email. We'll give you all that stuff and then we'll send you that slide deck. Happy to share that. Physical, right? Going to go through this really quickly, but there is a slew of amazing books out there. One of my favorites is Own the Day, Own Your Life by Aubrey Marcus. Another one is Atomic Habits by James Clear. A brilliant one that just came out, Ariana Huffington's from the Huffington Post, a second book of hers called Your Time to Thrive. They will really dive in to what I'm going to breeze through right now, and it's so helpful. Ariana's book is very, very good. Sleep and rest. It's a no-brainer. It's not a joke. I used to think it was BS. Oh, I'll sleep when I'm like in my 40s. Well, now
Sleep
I'm in
when
my
I'm dead.
40s. Now I'm in my 40s, and I'm like, that was a stupid thought back in my 20s, right? How dumb was I? Live it up while you're young. But as you, when I started hitting like 30, I was like, God, I really love 8 hours of sleep. It is necessary. Resetting and recharging are also absolutely necessary. Like Ron said, your brain is a muscle, and we wouldn't want to work out our bicep for 24 straight hours. Our cell phone, when it starts to get in the red on the battery, doesn't work so fast. Our brain is the same way. So resetting and recharging. So, so important. Nutrition, hydration, and exercise. And I would love to go deeper on this. It's paining me not to because it's in my nerdy wheelhouse of nutrition and hydration. But if you don't hydrate your brain, it's like not putting gas in your car and then trying to drive it. The same with fatty foods, exercise. So really find a way to learn a lot more about these things because it changes so much. Mental. So we talked a little bit about neuroplasticity, right? We can change all of this. Mental toughness to me, Tara, is your ability to become aware, give yourself self-care, whatever that self-care looks like, and change your mindset. And all of that, even if you say, Tara, my mindset's garbage, I've never been able to self-care before, amazingly enough, you can change that in your brain. So start practicing the right way. And when you fail, say, that's okay. It's like learning how to do push-ups. It takes time. Give yourself some grace and space to learn. Reframing goes with neuroplasticity, right? We create, here's the storyteller for the last however many decades. I'm here to tell you we create the stories in our head. We may not create what's happening in the world around us, but we create how we interpret it and how we respond to it. It's all our own private story. So be careful of how you frame it because it can change everything. And then, of course, many of you might already gratitude journal or just do gratitude thoughts when you wake up or go to bed. This is actual science and neuroplasticity. If we can train our brain to see gratitude, we can train our brain to see gratitude all the time instead of the negative. So paying it forward also does the same thing. Help your neighbor take out the trash. It'll make you feel a lot better. And it does actually relieve burnout. I know that sounds crazy. So that's the mental aspect. Emotional. This one, and I actually do want to share a little clip from one of my favorite audiobooks. And if you look this book up, it's fabulous. Make sure you do the audiobook, just like Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Got to go the audiobook route, right, Carrie? I know, right? Own the day, own your life. And Aubrey Marcus is just fabulous in everything we're talking about. From food to fun to, intimacy, all of it. It's great. But one of the big ones is play. And why am I making a big deal out of this? How many of you have found yourself having fun and playing a lot in the last year or during the first year of COVID? And
Can we do a thumbs down? Thumbs down?
Yeah, have you not? When is the last time you found yourself cracking up, just dying laughing, having fun, acting like a kid again? Right? I think the pandemic has stripped this away from us a little bit. And if you have kids, you are a little bit ahead of the game because kids can help, right? We can live vicariously with our children. It's why I started teaching at the university. It's a little secret. It's to be around young people that can make me feel young again, right? And play. So listen to this clip on why play is so important. And one of the ways to do that when you start feeling burnout is through music.
Music isn't just fun, it's scientifically proven fun. The research shows that when music is playing at home, people become physically closer. People are literally 12% closer when music is playing than when it's not. They actually measured this. When the music's going, people are a third more likely to cook together and almost 90% more likely to invite people over. They are more likely to laugh together, and here's the kicker, they are more likely to say the words, I love you. Oh, and then there's the most important connection of all. In a study conducted by the speaker company Sonos in conjunction with Apple Music and the neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, couples reported a stunning increase in intimacy when listening to music, and a nearly 40% increase in what they hilariously called awake time in bed. I'm guessing that doesn't mean reading Harry Potter, so go ahead and pump up the volume. Get silly. When did we stop playing? At some point, the backpack of responsibility weighed down our shoulders and made us get serious. Grow up, says the world. How about fuck you? Take that backpack off and play. Join a skee-ball league. Raid a bouncy castle. Buy a pinball machine. I have 2 pinball machines. My favorite is Avatar. My whole backyard, in fact, is built like an adult playground with a slack line, a trampoline, knife targets, volleyball, frisbee golf. I have a dartboard, a pool table, foosball. The gym on an HQ is a playground too. We have a loop in our jiu-jitsu room designed to allow adults to play the hot lava game, where you pretend the ground is lava and you have to travel a lap without touching it. If you've forgotten how to play, that's one of the great things kids are for. They can remind us what we've forgotten about the heart. Get on the level with someone younger than you and let loose. It's not only going to be fun, research shows that if you act younger, your biological markers actually start to reverse.
What do you think about that? What do you think about when I say when you're feeling burned out, just get silly? I actually had my business coach, because yes, even though I coach business leaders, I have had my own business coach for a few years now. And wow, I would never, ever lose that. My business coach is actually the one that told me in the middle of the pandemic, when's the last time you acted goofy? When's the last time you got silly? So my silliness, if I shall be vulnerable and tell everyone, just don't spread it around the internet, even though we're live recording. I listen to music every morning to get out of bed and just dance for a little bit. Find your silly. This will release the good biochemicals in our brain and in our body. So that's a lot on play. Creativity fits in there as well. What are some of the other ones? We've got connections and relationships. You all heard it from Aubrey, right? So important to have our tribe. And all of this gives us purpose and meaning.
All right. Thank you, Tara. That's all good stuff. I like that clip. And I used to play the hot lava game when I was a kid, right? We'd put little pillows on the floor as a kid, and we'd jump from one pillow to the next. And if you fell off the pillow, you fell into the lava. So I love to hear that.
Love that he does it at work.
All right. So this is a slide that we showed earlier, and I wanted to revisit this slide because I asked you, what's the difference? Why are millennials struggling a little bit more with this than baby boomers? I asked you to type that in the chat box, and I know we had some good answers, but here's what I think. And then, by the way, I don't know this from research, but what I think. What I know about millennials is they like to have purpose and meaning. Again, I'm painting with a broad stroke, but most of them say, I want to have purpose and meaning in my job. They want to work for a company that they can align with that purpose and meaning. So maybe there's a clue there, because baby boomers usually will say that's not as important to me as it is for millennials. And so maybe there's a clue here. All right. And so what I would offer to you, purpose is important. Purpose and meaning is important. Let's start with that. But here's the thing. Where do you find it? I think in a perfect world, we find purpose and meaning in both our job and as Tara and I started out this talk, in our life careers, right? What is it, or your life resume? What is it that you're doing outside of the office? Do you find purpose and meaning in that? If you can't find it at work, I hope that you can, but if you can't, you really got to make sure that you find it outside of work. Again, I think the holy grail is that we find it in both places. But sometimes that doesn't happen. We live in the real world, right? Sometimes we don't work for a company where we find purpose and meaning. Let go of that a little bit. I would say keep looking for that job that does have purpose and meaning, but find it somewhere else. When I ask people, do you have a hobby? And they say no, that hurts my heart. Have some hobbies, have some outside interests. And by the way, hobbies are going down. People do not practice hobbies nearly as much as they used to 50 years ago. All right? Why? Because most of us are overscheduled. We don't have time for that silliness, right? It goes back to the idea of play. Well, how do we, do a hobby? Do something that there's nothing productive to it. It's just something you enjoy. Find purpose and meaning in that. All right?
Can I give a prescription coaching moment here, Ron?
You bet.
All right. You have a piece of paper. You don't have to start it now, but definitely make a moment, even 60 seconds, sometime after this webinar today, to write down a list. When people tell me in coaching calls, I'm super burned out, the first thing I say is, I want you to write down the top 5 or 10 things that make you happy, that have nothing to do with work or your business that you're creating. What makes you happy? What is it that creates that smile and peace and joy and fulfillment that you do in your life? Is it travel? Is it your kids? Is it making delicious meals? Write down 5 to 10 of those. And then I want you to look at them, and I want you to be honest with yourself and say, when is the last time I did 3 of them? If you're answering, like most of my coaching clients, if you're answering, oh my gosh, I haven't done any of these in months. That's real, by the way. That's a true story.
I'd say,
Most people say that.
I think what's important here is Tara's clients usually don't recognize that they haven't done it until she
No.
points it out.
And I'm guilty too.
It slipped by the wayside and they didn't even realize it.
I'm guilty too. I do the check for myself. When's the last time I did a hike? So ask yourself that, and that, I promise you, is attributing to your burnout. And if you say, what are you talking about, Tara? I don't have time to go do these fun things.
You got to find the time.
If you don't, you will just continue to feel burned out. That's the point, right? When we're not doing what we love that makes us happy and unplug, we feel worse and worse and worse. So I really challenge you to try that mental push-up.
As you may have heard, certainly in the coaching world and self-development, if nothing changes, nothing changes. All right? If you say, well, I don't have time for that. Well, as Tara said early on, how's that working out for you? Part of the thing, if you get into a hole with burnout, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. And more than likely, you're going to have to cut some things out so that you can get the right things going. And I know that's going to be difficult for some of us, but maybe you need to care a little bit less. I'm somebody that is programmed to care a lot. Everything I do, I put a lot of care into, and sometimes I have to unplug from that. If you feel like you're that person, I'm a people pleaser. I'm working on that, but I'm a people pleaser, and I want people to be happy. So I put a lot of emphasis on that. And I'll tell you, one of my little mantras is my DGAF mantra. When I feel like I'm going too far into this idea of caring about everything and about all the people, as I say, DGAF. Don't give a. You can kind of guess what the F is. So, and I know that sounds like, hey, Ron, you're just unplugging from life. No, that's just my way of taking it down a notch. I still care a lot, but I'm at an unhealthy level of caring. And so when you have all these things piling up and you're going, oh, I got to take care of all this, you got to do a little bit of an assessment and say, what really is important right now? What can I get off my plate? Because here's, we go back to the definition. You are feeling overwhelmed. And if you keep trying to do it all, that's not going to change. All right. So we gotta say, okay, what can I get off this plate? And it may be a little bit of triage. Anybody that's in the medical field, you know what triage is, right? We got to say, okay, what's the most urgent patient that I have to deal with right now? Who can I put to the side? You need to do a little triage with your life. Okay. All right. We're getting close to wrapping this up. This is in review. This is what we talked about. Here's your prescriptions. Try to find ways to cultivate this into your lives. That is my hope for all of you. And in true Steve Jobs fashion, I'm going to do, if you guys remember, is anybody as old as me? You remember when Steve Jobs was around, every time he did a keynote speech, he would say, he would give all this great information. And then he'd say, one last thing, which is, there's some great psychology there. You're delighting your audience when you do that. But here's one last thing. A lot of you are entrepreneurs. We're at Denver Startup Week. You're starting a business. And maybe you look at that gentleman, Elon Musk, as maybe that's a role model for you. Elon Musk is very adamant about the idea. If you're starting up a company, you should be working at least 80 hours a week. And this is a man that is a CEO of two, I would say, world-changing companies. This is unheard of. Basically, he will tell you he works 120 hours a week. I am not here to advocate that you should follow in his footsteps. That is not the message I'm about to deliver. I think that is incredibly unhealthy, and I've read his autobiography, and I think he's burning the candle from multiple ends, not just two ends, but a lot of ends. But anyway, that's the calculus that he's doing. But here's the thing. Why does Elon Musk, working 120 hours a week, running two companies, not get burned out? Well, it might not be as simple as this, but this article, and you can go find this on the internet, they say that the simple thing that they have identified is that he has fun with what he does. It is a sense of play for him. He is pretty adamant about this in interviews that, he goes, this is fun. Now, I think that every minute is probably not fun, but for the most part, he looks at it as fun. So here's, again, we go back to this idea, which Tara emphasized earlier. Play and creativity are huge. If you can find a job where you feel like it's play and fun, you can probably up the game. You could probably do 80 or 120 hours. Again, I'm not advocating that, but that might be a way where you can take on more and not feel overwhelmed. I would also probably throw in that purpose and meaning. Do you think Elon Musk thinks there's a lot of purpose and meaning to both the companies he runs? Absolutely. So he's tying into two superpowers, play and purpose and meaning. Try to find those things in your life. Again, whether it's in the job or in your personal life, try to find that. All right.
So before we wrap that up, I just want to ask, I can see some of your faces, so you can raise your hand or put things in the chat as usual. How is all of this feeling? In the sense of, we've just laid not only a lot of statistics and a lot of neuroscience on you, but we've also laid a lot of ideas. Some that have worked for Ron and I, some that work for our clients, some that work statistically proven to work. A lot of them you can read in books, but we've laid a lot on you. Is anyone feeling overwhelmed?
We're talking about what leads to burnout, overwhelm, and we just overwhelmed you.
We
some
just
more.
totally overwhelmed you. So here's what I want to say, and we like sped through this thing because we had so much we wanted to share. This is the great thing about us sharing the deck. So again, I'll share our emails here, and you can link with us on LinkedIn to get the deck so you can go back through at your own pace. But here's the other thing. Start small. Take one or two things. If it's scheduling a few hours a week, peppered throughout your week, of self-care time or play time, start there. Don't try to do 50 of the things we just talked about today, because that typically doesn't work. So pick one, excel at it, and then choose another one. So be careful not to try it all at one time. I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm guilty and have done that.
Great tip. Don't try to do everything we just showed you. Take it one step at a time, one small bite at a time. So let's wrap this up. We're almost out of time, and I want to hammer you with a couple more, I think, strong points. As maybe all of you have felt like during this pandemic, we're running, much like this picture, we're running with a parachute. We're putting out all this effort, and we just know we're not running as fast as we used to run, right? Before the pandemic, we didn't have that parachute, and we could run like the wind. Well, I'm telling you, even though the pandemic isn't over yet, it's time to cut that parachute loose. And once we do, what is that parachute doing? It's stressing us, and it's making us grow stronger. I know that sometimes that's hard for people to say, you know what, the pandemic's a good thing. I don't know if I'm ready to say that, but we are getting stronger from this. And now it's time to cut that baby loose, and it's time to thrive. Run like the wind like you used to. That's what I encourage all of you to try to do. I know that's what I'm doing, and I think Tara is as well. It's time to get out of survival mode and move into thriving. We're at the end. Forging Metal, we approach something. I mean, basically what we do is we work, as Tara has mentioned, we coach, we do consulting, we do trainings like this. And we really kind of have this model of what we call mental excellence. You can see, mental toughness, resilience, and grit. We can see the neuroscience coming into it. We did a talk with women in leadership. So we're very big on inclusivity, bringing women to the table. So all of this kind of encompasses what we do at Forging Metal. We hope that you maybe follow along with our podcast, reach out to us. There's our emails. You can find our podcast wherever you find podcasts. Please visit us, reach out to us, follow us on social media. We would love that. And again, I just want to say thank you again. We know your time is valuable, and it is incredibly humbling that you spent 90 minutes with us. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, everybody. Everybody enjoy the rest of the week and go into the weekend with some play. Yeah?
Play. Love it. Go find some fun. Watch your backpack.
Watch that backpack. Empty
See
that
ya.
backpack.
Everybody go out and do good things. Thank you for joining.
And Tom, if you could not end the recording just yet, just give me.
Yeah,
one
I'm
quick
reading.
minute.
I'm reading through some of these chats that I didn't get to see.
I'm grabbing the chat box just in case they didn't save it.
Good stuff. Good stuff in here. I was missing all this. I hope we get a transcript of this. That's a great one. What happened in the funny section of the news? Remember when they used to have comics in the news?
I know. And, I stopped reading the news, to be honest, because I just had to do it.
It's
So
doom and
I didn't
gloom.
even know that went away. How sad.
All right. Good
All
stuff.
right. Good to go.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your help, Tom. Thanks to Denver Startup Week.
Yes. Thanks for the opportunity. We will see you next time.